Welcome to the Bail in the Midwest podcast, hosted by Shane Rolf.
Hello and welcome to the Bail in the Midwest podcast, where we explore a variety of topics related to bail, pretrial release, and the criminal justice system in the Midwest. My name is Shane Rolf. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Kansas Bail Agents Association, and I've worked in this field for the past 38 years. Now, in his book, Criminal Injustice, Rafael Mangua cites data from the 2019 National Survey on Drug Use and Health, which indicates that less than 21% of Americans over age 12 have ever used an illicit drug. Now, this data is probably likely a little out of date given the recent wave of marijuana legalization, and the study in 2022 shows that like 25% of people have used marijuana in the past year, or 20%. But even 2022 stats from the same survey indicate that less than 9% of the population has used an illicit drug other than marijuana in the past year, and a large percentage of those are prescription medications. But despite this small percentage of the population who has used or is using drugs, the Bureau of Justice Statistics indicated in a 2010 study that between 60 to 65% of incarcerated people meet the diagnostic criteria for drug abuse or dependence. So drug abusers are overrepresented among criminal defendants. And this holds true even when the drug charges themselves are eliminated from the calculation. Mangua also cites data on mental health, pointing out that one disorder, antisocial personality disorder, has a prevalence in the male population of anywhere from 2 to 4%. So 1 in 50 to 1 in 25 people. Pretty small number, but it's estimated that anywhere from 40 to 70% of the male prison population is clinically diagnosable with antisocial personality disorder, meaning people with just this one particular mental health condition are overrepresented in the criminal justice system by some 20 to 30 times the rate of the population as a whole. Other mental health conditions, such as bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, are similarly overrepresented in the criminal justice system. And while advocates for the mentally ill, for lack of a better term, point out that those with mental health problems are not more dangerous than the average person, there is one glaring exception to this. People with mental health problems who also abuse drugs are much more likely to be dangerous and much more likely to be arrested. And just as a side comment, it's important to note that poverty, which is one of the more popular arguments for crime, people stealing food to feed their families, that sort of thing, and which is the sole argument for bail reform, that poor people are being unfairly locked up, is not really a factor in these statistics, since the data shows that over half of male inmates had a pre-incarceration income of over double the poverty rate. But that aside, a number of studies have shown that only about 6% of the total population is responsible for about 50% of all crimes committed. It seems reasonable to assume that these people who are overrepresented in the criminal justice system, that is, people with drug problems and mental health issues, they likely make up a significant portion of that 6%, probably a Venn diagram of crime, if you would. So if we could get a handle on the issues affecting this subset of the population, theoretically, we could have a major impact on crime. My guest today has been working in this field for the past few decades. Scott Jones is one of the co-founders of One Brother, One Sister, an organization that deals with both of these issues of addiction and mental health. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, my friend.
So tell us a little bit more about One Brother, One Sister, as well as the other organizations that you operate. I noticed that a lot of your literature references ATC or Addiction Training Center, and you have lots of podcasts on your YouTube channel, Sober Life Studios, and I think you may have more than one YouTube channel as well. So just kind of broad strokes, what do you guys do?
Broad strokes, my business partner, Karyn Hurley, and I have known each other for 44 years. 44 years of friendship. We both are in recovery from substance abuse disorders and alcohol use disorder. And as I said, being friends, we kind of gravitated towards each other later in life to start working together. And what that looked like is we wanted to help people. We got involved in the treatment industry, and then what we found out is that by working in the treatment industry, you have to follow their rules, and you have to follow their diagram of diagnosis, if you will, how they do things. And unfortunately, they're behind the times, so that's why we're not being as successful as we'd like. So doing that, knowing that, we started working with people like Dog the Bounty Hunter. We started working with other people that were high up in the industries of addiction and mental health, developing courses that we can bring out to the public to teach them how to deal with addictions and alcoholism and mental health in their communities, their workplaces, and even in their families. And that's when Addiction Training Center was born. Addiction Training Center operated for many years, and it is now, Addiction Training Center is now, for all intents and purposes, that is closed because we've decided to move everything into a nonprofit area of Addicted Communities Coalition, which is where the One Brother, One Sister program lives. Okay. That program was developed especially for first responders and people who work within the jail systems, vets, police, fire, what have you. And we wanted to get the information to the people on the front lines who are seeing addiction and mental health disorders on a daily basis. And that's what we've been able to do with our nonprofit. Working with police and fire, we work on donations only. We never charge them for our services. We get donations so we can go in. We could train them on how to do a proper intervention, how to recognize when somebody is in a dangerous situation with a mental health disorder or substance use disorder. Karyn Hurley, as I said, my business partner, her brother was a firefighter and a vet, and he died of a suicide about maybe 5.5 years ago. And that's when we really went full bore into helping first responders and working even in the prison populations. My wife died 4 years ago from an overdose. So we're driven. We're driven in what we do. And again, as much as I would love to work in the treatment industry so I can help individuals, there are too many things that handcuff us from actually being able to help people. And if we can get out into the communities and, most importantly, as we're talking about, into the bail industry, where we've got an opportunity to get somebody who has created a problem for themselves or ended up in a bad situation because of a substance abuse disorder, mental health disorder, and get them the proper treatment they need, and stop punishing people for an illness and start treating that illness and getting them the help. This has been really kind of our push lately, working with organizations like PBUS, David Stockman, and so on. So that is where we're at now. We still do work with treatment centers in different parts of our nonprofit organization that is set up separately. We're working on having all of our courses and everything we do online so that we can reach more people. This is not anything that's ever going to make us rich. We're aware of that. I'm just going to let you know. We do this because we have a passion for it.
Well, I've been not through, but I've attended a few with family members, drug treatment centers, where the family comes in and meets and you have the family encounter and stuff along those lines. And so I have noticed that a lot of the people who work in these facilities are former addicts or people who, dealt with problems and have basically devoted themselves towards helping other people with similar problems. I mean, it is sort of the 12-step model, I guess, but a lot of people in those programs have that sort of background history and they understand that, and so they can focus on that.
Well, that's good to have. And listen, if you have somebody who has a shared experience, certainly it's easier for them to communicate. But I think we rely too much on that.
Okay.
Because when we're dealing with things like mental health or even substance abuse disorder, alcohol use disorder, we're not talking about a disease that is identifiable through through a CAT scan or through some sort of a brain scan or blood work even. We're not talking about that. This is a behavioral disorder, a behavioral illness. So the real criteria we need people who care about other human beings, and that's how we can connect with them. Just because somebody happened to be addicted to heroin and I was addicted to alcohol, doesn't mean we've got an automatic connection. But if I can connect with my humanness to their humanness, I can make a difference. And that's what we want to get out there, is that even if you don't have any frame of reference for the disorder itself, you have a frame of reference for being a human being, for being happy, for being productive, for learning about yourselves, learning your weaknesses and your strengths. That's the people we need working with people. Although, like I said, I'm not discounting having the peer support, the peer who knows what's going on, but it really must go beyond that. We really need to start relying on it. It's an illness that happens to human beings, and you don't treat the disease, you treat the human being, and the disease becomes a non-factor.
Well, one of the things that, I mean, this is maybe a little off topic on there, but one of the problems I've sort of had with those types of programs, and I'm not saying they don't work or that people don't need them, is that oftentimes you spend all your time talking about what you're not doing. I'm not drinking. I'm not doing drugs. I mean, one day at a time. I'm not. So every single time, if all day long, all you're thinking and talking about what you're not doing, you're going to fail at that event. Eventually, you're going to do that again.
That's right. That's right. Shane, what a great point, because if I told you right now, don't think about elephants, don't think about elephants, don't think about elephants.
Exactly.
You're going to call me at 2 a.m. So, damn it, I'm thinking about elephants, you know?
Right.
And you're right. The focus on the negative, what it does two things. One is it keeps their mind fresh about what they're missing. You know, it keeps my thought on, I can't drink and I can't use, and I can't drink and I can't use. The other thing it does is it makes the human smaller than the disease. And that's not what we should be doing. We should be bringing the human out and talking more about, well, okay, here's what you did, but what are you going to do next? This is where we need to focus on the positive movements and on the positive things. I mean, even with the bail industry, you know, if the whole time they're out on bail, somebody keeps reminding them, you're going to mess up, you're going to mess up. You're nothing but a criminal and this and that. That's what they're going to lean towards. But if somebody was there to say, listen, you could change, you could do things different. Here's the path, you know, find a way. Then we could start making a change. We could reduce recidivism and we can make an impact in our communities. But the addiction must be treated the same way.
So let's we have a lot of people come in. I mean, parents come in the office all the time and they tell us, you know, well, you know, yeah, it's a possession of whatever. And, you know, I don't know what happened to him. He had an accident, he had an injury, got hooked on pain meds, and then things went south from there. And without a doubt that happens. Pain meds can lead to opioid abuse, and that can lead to harder, more dangerous drugs like heroin and fentanyl. But that hardly seems like the sole pathway to addiction, since other drugs like methamphetamine, they don't offer any sort of pain relief. What are some of the most common pathways to addiction that you see?
Well, you know, there's theories about that too, about, you know, there's a hereditary factor because of brain chemistry makeup, where somebody might be dopamine deficient before they ever pick up a drug or a drink, and that would make drinking and drugging much more attractive, because a deficiency in dopamine, you're not a very happy person. But if you add the flood of chemistry, all of a sudden, wow, this is how I get happy. So that happens, and that's a pretty good number of people. I think one of the biggest things, though, is prescription meds becoming an issue. We're seeing this more and more and more. Doctors are trained, Shane, for what, 8 to 10 years of schooling and everything else. In that time, the required addiction training during an 8 to 10 year educational program is 16 hours. That's it. It's not good enough. We're prescribing things like oxys and we're prescribing other drugs without any kind of titration. So what happens is, you know, I'm going to put you on this drug for the football season because you tore your knee and it hurts. And then when at the end of the season, your prescription runs out, the doctor didn't bring you down slowly. He didn't bring you on to something else to bring you down. He just cut you off. And so they start looking in the streets for someone else who has that prescription where they could buy their pills. And in lieu of not finding those pills, they will accept things like heroin. You know, God forbid, people are getting into fentanyl now.
No, I've had at least 4 clients in the past year who've died. You know, I get the call from the parents afterwards, you know, she died, you know, basically because, I mean, I guess if you're going to argue if you're prescription medication, at least you know what the dosage is. You know what you're taking. You can make some decision from there. But if you're dealing with heroin or fentanyl, you have no idea what the concentration of that if it's a street level drug.
Right.
And fentanyl, my understanding from some of the other courses that I've taken is, if you fall off on that, and then, and I guess heroin's the same thing, but if you go back to the same level, it's like you spent, a month in jail, for instance, and then come back out and want to use again, well, you're much more susceptible to an overdose at that point if you go back to the same level that you've been using before.
That is a distinct possibility. And plus, when you're thinking about when you're buying anything like off the streets, heroin, cocaine, even marijuana these days, whenever you're buying anything off the street, you don't know what the concentration is. You were right. The prescriptions, I know what the concentration is. The FDA follows it very carefully. If it says 50 micrograms, that's what's in it, and you know these things. But when you're buying on the street, you have no idea. Most people have never had pure heroin or pure cocaine or pure any drug, really. But if you get something that's a little more pure than the next, you're right, especially if you're a little bit of time away from it. People go out there. Now, fentanyl is a game changer for all of us now. Fentanyl is, that's how my wife passed away, and that's how many of the people that I deal with today, that we lose them to fentanyl, because they're putting it in things and people don't know that it's there.
Right.
And it's a game changer. People who used to go out and use and party for weeks on end and never have an issue are now in danger of one night taking one drug and being dead. It's a scary time. The thing is, our times are changing. The numbers of suicides are going up. The numbers of mental health, mental issues are going up. The numbers of incarcerated people with addictions is going up. The one thing that's not going up is our level of success with treating addiction. The best treatment centers in the world still hover around 8%. 12-step programs that have been around for 60 years. Almost 70 years, I guess, still hover at 3.5% is their success rate. This is what we're dealing with.
Right. No, I'm aware.
Yes. And that's one of the reasons that Karyn and I, my business partner and I, are so passionate about getting this word out there, because the only thing that's going to change these tides is to change the apathy that exists out in the world. Is to change where we step over somebody who's laying in the street so we can go sit in a nice seat in church or get a nice table in a restaurant, but we step over somebody. It's that apathy that we have to change. It's the person who goes off, and unfortunately we see violent incidences, especially when you have mental health and addictions combined. Right. You see a lot of violent things where people say, yeah, we knew he was a mess, but we didn't know what to do. We need to do something about that, and that's why it's so important that we get the word out there and train as many people as possible to recognize and to know how to communicate with somebody who needs help.
Well, let's talk about some of the initial training. Is the law enforcement and first responders, and so you offer training in recognizing addiction and mental health issues for first responders, and this is both from training them, but also for their jobs for self-care. These people, first responders often develop addiction issues. But, you think of all people, first responders actually see on a daily basis the consequences of substance abuse. Police and firefighters and EMTs, they should be in a position that this, where they can see with their own eyes on a daily basis that this is a negative path. How is it that a certain number of first responders end up with these issues?
Shane, what a great question, Shane, because I'll tell you, you would think that, seeing the car crashes, seeing the overdoses, especially down here in South Florida, Palm Beach is one of the capitals in the world for overdoses down here. And they see it all the time, and yet their personal pain trumps what they've seen with their eyes, their personal struggles. Listen, in the old days, policemen, firemen, first responders they'd get to the end of their shift, they'd all go to the bar and drink until they felt good enough to go home. That was their therapy. In fact, many fire stations, especially if you go back in the old days, built bars either inside the fire station or just outside. Like they built a structure where they could go out after the shift and drink. So they see a drunk driver who kills a child, God forbid, but it happens, kills
Right.
a child. They show up at that, but then they've got to go home and deal with it. They're not thinking about the drunken part. They're thinking about what they saw, what traumatizes them.
Right.
So it's hard for them to look at it objectively and to make that connection between the alcohol and the accident. To them, it's more, look at what I've just seen, this child who died in front of me. And so they self-medicate. And I would say, even though they had the bar before, one of the things they used to do is talk to each other a lot. Police stations, fire stations, they used to talk to each other. We call it the firehouse table talk, where after a fire, you all go back, you cook chili, you sit there and you talk. Now everybody's going in their corners and they're on their cell phones or on their laptops or in their own bunks, and they separate themselves. So even though we're moving in a good direction as far as health-wise, socialization is going down. So we're trying to bring that back where, when you get back from a call, talk to somebody. If you see somebody who is stressed out, and this is where we're talking about the self-preservation. If you're a first responder, it's good to have somebody's back when you're walking into a fire or going after somebody who's armed. It's good that your partner has your back, but they should also have your back on the ride back to the station after that incident to know that you're not okay and to get you to talk. So, yeah, it is important. First responders, we're seeing anywhere from 50 to 60 times more likely that they will commit suicide than somebody in an average job. They are 40 to 50% more likely to develop PTSD, trauma, and mental health disorders. And those same numbers apply with addictions and alcoholism. They are in a super high risk situation, and they deal with it out on the streets. But more importantly, they have to start dealing with it back at the station. It's easy to deal with something, and this is going to sound strange. It's easy to deal with 9/11. Because it's big, it's out there, everybody saw it, everybody's talking about it.
Right.
But it's the accident over there on Route 9 in the middle of the night. That's the one that gets to them, and nobody talks about it, and nobody's aware of it.
Well, and are there not disincentives for that as well? I know that I was flying back from a conference and ended up sitting next to a girl that was in the military, and she had been back to Washington for a pseudo court martial. For what clearly seemed to be a PTSD, generated event. I mean, she had been in Iraq and been one of the bases that was struck by missiles, and there was some fight with the command. Anyway, she was having and clearly just from the conversation, she had some issues, but there was a disincentive to bring that up because then you would be sidelined. And our first responders in that same vein. Okay, well, yeah, if I bring this up, unless I want to be taken off the street, unless I want to be assigned to this desk job, unless I want to go sit there and talk to this shrink for the next month and a half, I better just shut up.
Well, you know what? That's a great point, and that's a lot of the reasons why you don't speak up, whether it's in the military or as a first responder. I don't want to lose my seat in the squad car, or lose my seat on the truck, or I don't want to leave my buddies here, and I don't want to be pulled from the foxhole, because I said something. So they keep it buried inside. That's one of the things that we're also fighting to do is, when you say something, you shouldn't be punished for saying something. Now, obviously, if somebody's going to be a danger to themselves or others, we can all agree that they should not be serving at that time. Right. But in many cases, we need to normalize mental health wellness and taking care of yourself. If we can normalize that, where if I have a bad call and I'm not feeling good, I could talk about it right then and there. I've got people available. They're building peer support and critical management teams in most first responder places, in fire stations and police stations. But it's not enough. That's where they identify if there's a big issue, let me go deal with that. It's the day-to-day where we've got to encourage people to talk about things so it doesn't build up. Listen, if every day at the end of the day, a soldier gets a chance to just decompress and speak what's going on, chances of that building and becoming cumulative trauma is less. Same thing with police and same thing with fire. And then even with soldiers coming back, you would think that's the great time to catch them. Our veterans coming back from war. And because of the way the logistics works these days, I mean, back in World War I, World War II, when you finish service, it takes you almost a month and a half to get back home because, you're doing different things and you're with people.
Right.
Here, you could be fighting in Afghanistan one day and then 24 hours later having dinner with your family. It can happen that fast. There's no point of decompression. And the only reporting that they do on trauma is self-reporting. You basically, if you're leaving the service, they ask you to fill out some forms and self-report on how you're doing. That's not good enough because most people just want to get home and they're just going to say, I'm okay, and get out of there. And there's no real oversight on that. So we need to get this into our U.S. Military system. It needs to be in every police station, every fire department, where we get to not only watch each other's back, but make it normal to talk about things on a daily basis.
Well, is there a male versus female dynamic on that as well? The whole notion that it's a weakness, or basically it's a failing to admit what can be seen as a weakness, even though if it's perfectly reasonable. I just saw a horrific event that's still burning in the back of my eyeballs. Is that still viewed as a weakness or a failing to basically just rub some dirt on it and walk it off?
Well, yeah, we're in the midst of that change right now, Shane. We're seeing that change, but it's slow. And as far as females in military or police or fire service, they've got it doubly bad because now a guy has to deal with his own machismo, if you will, or their own image of should I talk about this or not talk about this, while the female firefighter, the female police officer or veteran has to think, should I share this? And the minute I start talking, all of a sudden, I've already got a label of woman that I've tried to overcome. The minute I say that, now I'm just a crying little girl. So they've got it almost worse, and they tend to stuff it down even deeper than most men do.
Well, okay, let's get off something a little less depressing here. You do offer bail bond training here. Can you kind of describe some of the programs you offer for bail bondsmen? I know that a lot of bail bondsmen have gone through the program, but kind of give us the view of that.
Absolutely, we do a certified motivational intervention course, and we tailor it so that it makes sense to bond people. We use different statistics and different numbers and even some different skills based on how often they are in contact with the client and things like that. But this is about if somebody has a problem and they're maybe either in denial or had not considered that this is what's causing their problem. This gives us a clue on how to communicate with them, how to make that connection so that you can make suggestions that they might follow. People will listen to people they like. So we teach you build rapport with that person and really kind of possibly steer them in a good direction. We also have courses that are more specifically in the communication genre, where we have advanced communication, where it shows how to connect with people, even if you know nothing about them. There are certain clues, and there's different things, and this goes into little pieces of NLP, little pieces of body language and understanding things, where you can make a better connection with people in a very short period of time. And then finally, we have advanced de-escalation courses, where if somebody does start to get upset, it's not always the best answer to tase them. Sometimes we should try some other verbal de-escalations. And we offer a variety of options on how you can deal with a certain situation. Most importantly, we want you to learn about yourself, too, when we're training bail agents. Understand that if you don't understand how you project yourself, you've already lost the communication game. So it's about teaching them about understanding their own projections and how to change those if you need to. How to go from, you start off, maybe you're in an intense situation where maybe you're on a bounty hunt and you got to get somebody, but how do you turn that switch from I just chased this guy to now I've got him, let me talk to him. And we show people how to do that, flip that switch. But with bail agents especially, here's the deal. If we can get them to communicate with their clients and get help while they're on bail, that does three things that are incredible. One is it might actually save somebody's life. It might save their life if they can get sober. Two is they're not going to go anywhere because now they're in treatment, and it's a much more secure situation for the agent or the surety company who's holding that client, that they are doing something positive instead of on the streets where they might commit another crime, overdose, hurt somebody, hurt themselves. And finally, this is how we improve our communities and get more people out of the prison system. Okay, you made a mistake, let's go fix and see what we can do. And we're very passionate about helping the bail industry with that. I think with the bail reform and everybody looking at everything, I think maybe if we can really put the focus on this isn't just about that. This is about improving human lives and add that to the mix. It can only help the bail industry.
Sure. Now, we haven't really talked about it, but I know that you've done other podcasts with other people about bail reform, which basically is bail elimination is probably a better way to say that. But there's an argument: does eliminating bail serve society as well? It's always been my argument that it does not, because it doesn't offer, bail elimination doesn't offer any avenues for intervention. If you get arrested, you have to post a meaningful bond. You're going to have to reach out to your friends and your family to facilitate that. Bonding companies don't just go, oh, yeah, hey, give me $100 and I'll get you out of jail and go on about your day. Those people that they're reaching out, that community support network, other people describe it as the circle of love. Community support network sounds a little more technical, which is my vein. Those people often know you, and sometimes they won't post the bond at all. I'm not getting him out. I'll get him out in 3 weeks. Here's your forced detox. Or if they do get him out, it'll be done with a number of conditions. Get a job, go to rehab, counseling, et cetera. Can you expand on the importance of early intervention and family involvement? I know sometimes family can be the problem, but oftentimes they're the only people you have to turn to.
Well, first of all, I want to this is something that I said in previous podcasts, exactly what you said. Stop calling it bail reform. You're talking about bail elimination. Just say the words if you're going to play with this, all right? If you want reform, let's sit down and talk about how to make it better, but that's not what they're talking about.
Right. So
let's get that clear. When you hear bail reform, my first thought was, let's make it better. That's not what that's about. It's always better to make it better. But having that involvement with the families now, and bringing in with what we're doing, so that when we're talking to the families, when the person's talking to families, the families also have, they could set conditions. Say, listen, Bobby, I'll bail you. I'll put it up, but you're not going back on the streets to hang out with Jimmy and Tommy and Fred, the guys you got in trouble with.
Right.
You're going to go into treatment. You're going to straighten your butt out, and that's my condition. I think it's brilliant to do that. I think sometimes families just want to enable and make things okay. It's all good and fine to get Bobby out of jail, but if you're bringing him and putting him right back in that situation that he was in before he went to jail, what have you really done? All you've done is delay a consequence that he probably should face. But if you have them on a path to do something different, to change, it doesn't always mean going into treatment either. Sometimes it could mean getting involved in a church, because there's a lot of church and community worship centers that have great programs for helping people with mental health and addictions. And so there's a lot of options. Even going to therapy might be the answer. But you've got, if you're going to help somebody, then help them for real. If the mom and dad or your uncle or your wife or your husband is going to bail you out, do something substantial with that and put them on a path to success. Don't just bail them out to sit around and wait. Do something positive. I'll tell you also, Shane, in my experience, and we've done this hundreds of times, every time we've had somebody go through treatment and then go back and stand in front of the judge, because they're doing all this before their court cases come up.
Sure.
There has been nothing but positive feedback and reduced sentences every time. It is a very noticeable thing. And not only it makes the client look good, it makes the lawyer look good, and it makes the bail agent who facilitated it look good too.
Well, and I've told people this, multiple times, these judges, they're not wanting to put you in jail. they want to alter your behavior so that you get off of that track. If they can do that, if you can go through some other path that doesn't involve, okay, we're just going to smack you, as hard as we have to, as many times we have to until you get the message. If you can take another path and get away from that, they're more than happy to take that off ramp to get you out of the system as best they can.
Absolutely. I've seen the same thing. I think in all of our years of doing this, and we've been working with bail in one form or another, probably, I think 6 years now. We only came across one judge who gave us a hard time about a client coming into treatment. One judge in all of that time. And we don't know why. He was very adamant. They're not leaving their city. They're not leaving this. They're not doing this. He had a chip on his shoulder, but that is a rarity. The truth is, almost every judge we stood in front of, you're right, wants to see change. They want to see. They don't want somebody to sit in prison. They want to see somebody actually get reformed. And this is one of the pathways we have to doing this, is dealing with their addictions and dealing with their mental health disorders.
So we'll finish up the bond stuff here, real quick, and then get on a couple of things. But so we're obviously not going to replicate the entire course, here in, the next 10, 15 minutes. But what are some of the things that we can do, just kind of the 5-minute version of how do we help our clients, or advice that we can give to parents or loved ones who are in our office to postpone? What can we do to maybe push them in a particular direction that's helpful?
Well, first thing, and this is probably the most important thing, abandon your preconceptions and abandon any assumptions you have. Because I look at somebody and I might have developed already an idea that they're just an angry person, or that they're a heroin addict, or this or that. We have to find out from the person what is actually going on with them. So we have to open ourselves up to those conversations. What are they feeling? What are they doing? What are they using? Don't make assumptions. The minute you make an assumption about somebody, you lose them if you guess wrong. So you want to be careful about that. So that's important. Getting to know the person on a personal level. What is it that they're interested in? Do they just want to get out of trouble, or do they want to turn their life around? Most people don't even ask the clients. They don't even ask, what do you want? You robbed a liquor store, you robbed it, you beat this person up, you did this, you did that, but nobody says, what are you looking for when you're doing all that? What is it you want? And so if we could connect them to what they really want, and what most people don't want in their life is to sit in jail. What people want is some sort of freedom, or to be a better person, but they don't believe in themselves enough. So don't make assumptions, get to know them and ask what they want. And then finally, don't make promises you can't keep. Don't make promises you can't keep. You will jump, we'll jump through hoops for them. We'll do everything we can. But at the end of the day, the real driving force behind this is the client themselves, if they want to change and get better. So don't promise that you're going to fix them or cure them, but tell them you'll walk the path with them as long as they're willing to walk it.
Well, do they have to? We've always heard this. You got to hit rock bottom before you get better. But I've always made the argument that rock bottom's a different level for every person. Can you treat this as your rock bottom and move forward from this, or are you going to let yourself fall further down into this hole that you're digging?
Yeah, that's certainly a good point. They do talk about that, is that, you can't get better until you hit bottom. But that's really, the only real bottom there is death. That's the only real bottom there is. So, it's really more a matter of, when are you going to want something different? Again, we could sit there with them and describe how terrible their life is. They don't need that description. They're living it. They know.
Right.
What they need is a description of a life that they can have. Let me show you what you can have. What's behind curtain number 2? We're on Truth or Consequence, whatever the show. What's behind curtain number 2? Let's show them what's behind the curtain.
Okay. Now, something that I find really interesting, and I definitely wanted to talk about here, was the brain chemistry thing. I know that you guys do a seminar called Understanding Addiction and Brain Chemistry, and your website also has a section on nutrition. So my personal experience, I lost about 50 pounds a few years ago, and I managed to ditch pretty much all of my medications that I was on by altering my diet. And now I'm seeing a lot of new books and literature come out linking diet and brain health. Dr. George Eads has a book titled Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind. And Chris Palmer has a book called Brain Energy. And both of these books talk about the link between diet and a whole host of mental disorders, particularly anxiety and depression. I'm kind of curious if you cover that sort of stuff in your brain chemistry and nutrition, or am I off in the weeds here?
No, not at all. We do it with primarily about how addiction and alcoholism can alter brain chemistry and the things that happen. But we also tie that into the mental health and the nutrition factor, that your brain has no defense against most of these things that are going on, because most people who are suffering from mental health disorders or addiction, substance abuse disorders, don't have proper diets and they don't take care of themselves very well. So your brain requires so much tryptophan, so much 5-HTP, so much B12 and B9 and all of the other vitamins and minerals and aminos that we have in our brain. It requires all that, and we get that from the food that we eat if we eat the right foods. If you're not eating those right foods, your brain becomes depleted. A depleted brain becomes depressive in most cases. Not given that you don't have a psychoaffective disorder beforehand, it can become depressive. It can become anxiety. Serotonin levels, if serotonin levels get messed up because you don't have the brain chemistry to build enough serotonin, that's where we see anxiety and paranoia come in. If dopamine is not built because you don't have enough vitamins, aminos, and minerals to build dopamine in your brain, then you end up with things like depression and suicidal ideations. So your brain chemistry that's who we are, is what's the brain chemistry. And it's amazing how we don't take care of it and we're not even aware of it. And the thing that happens, the way that that chemistry is built in our brain, is the exact system gets attacked by foreign objects like alcohol and drugs. And what happens is, even after, a lot of people wonder, it's like, well, if they got sober, why didn't they stay sober? It's because it takes almost 2 years for your brain chemistry to fully recover. So even though you're sober, you're no longer drinking or drugging, you still might not feel right for quite a while. And that's a hard thing. So we've got to learn how to build up our chemistry again, taking aminos and minerals and vitamins to rebuild our system. I'll give you a prime example. That one of the biggest problems we have in the U.S. is migraines. People have migraines here more than most other places. And what that is that 3/4 of the United States are magnesium deficient. If somebody has regular migraines, if they take magnesium, there is a very good possibility, like 75 to 80% possibility that will cure their migraines, because they are deficient of the magnesium. So, these are things that we like to teach and we want people to understand.
Correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but the daily recommended allowance for magnesium, I think, I might be confusing this with a different mineral, but is set up at the minimum to prevent you from getting, is it rickets or is it something else? I might be confusing those, but the daily recommended allowance on magnesium is just at a disease, a particular disease prevention level, not really at your optimum level for magnesium consumption. Yeah,
I don't have the numbers, and so I'm not sure in front of me right now. But I will tell you that, here's the problem with magnesium is that you can get your daily allotted. You could take that, right, your daily allotted magnesium, but you might not be absorbing any of it. First of all, you've got to make sure that you've got a high quality magnesium. When you're dealing with vitamins and minerals and aminos, they're covered under Food and Drug, the Grasso Act. They're not regulated the same way your prescription meds are.
Right.
They don't have to be inspected. If they say you're getting 15 milligrams of something, they don't have to give you 15 milligrams of something. You don't know what you're getting. So avoid the cheap stuff. Forget the one-a-days and all the other things. You need to go to a good vitamin shop and look for for quality products that were created in a lab. That's one of the things that we also show people is how to find those and identify quality products. It doesn't always mean more expensive, but it means that it will absorb into your system properly. Magnesium itself cannot go into your system. It needs something to carry it. So people take magnesium chlorate, magnesium
glycinate.
I can't remember the names.
Magnesium glycinate, I think, is one of them. But like magnesium oxide, which is the most common, it doesn't absorb at all.
No.
And so you can take 100 milligrams of that, and you might as well not take anything at all.
Right, exactly. That's one of the problems we have. So we can identify what's wrong with the brain and what people need, but then if you're going to go over to Walgreens and buy the stuff that they have there, you're not going to get anything. You've got to get good quality vitamins and know, what's a good chelator, what's a good carrier, and so that we can get it into our systems.
Well, but then if you're using drugs along with that, do some of those drugs, and alcohol as well, do they have a diuretic effect that then depletes your body of those same minerals and amino acids that it needs, that basically exacerbates that situation even further?
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, if you're going to be using, we get a lot of people coming in and saying, they just spent the last 5 years doing heroin, and they walk into a treatment center. I need to get to a gym because my body's a temple. I'm like, how's your body a temple if you're putting heroin in it? I never understood it. All the things that we think we want to do healthy, adding alcohol and drugs to those negates everything that you're doing. It really does. The simple example I give, just for the layman, is if you have a perfectly clear glass of water and it's perfectly clear, and that's your biosystem, that's all your chemistry and everything. Now you take a whole handful of mud and rocks and rusty metal and everything else, and you throw it into that cup. That sinks right to the bottom, and all the good stuff comes out the top. The chemistry that goes with the drugs and alcohol that we use stays in your body quite a long time, and it locks in. It does not allow the room for the proper nutrients. Everybody is depleted when they first get sober, so we got to work to build that back up. Understanding what goes on with the brain chemistry could be very interesting for most people too.
Well, let's get, we're running low on time, so I want to cover another thing. I want to talk a little bit about drug legalization. Many states have engaged in wholesale decriminalization of marijuana, and the state of Oregon had decriminalized hard drugs. I mean, heroin and methamphetamine, and that's policy that they're now rolling back. From an addiction perspective, does legalization help the problem? Or are we able to, and the argument is we're going to repurpose all the money we spent on the war on drugs into treatment, or does legalization just simply normalize drug use?
Well, first of all, the war on drugs was one of the biggest failures of any administration, and we continue with the war on drugs. Over $1 trillion spent, not one addict was saved. It was all about fighting the drugs, and the drugs aren't the problem. Right. So when you legalize something like marijuana, it may change the culture of a community. It may change some of the criminal activity actually may go down in those areas of selling pot, or if you will, or any of those things. But it still needs to be recognized that there are some people that can use marijuana, just like there's some people who could stop and have a scotch after work, and it's not a problem for them. But if you have a substance abuse disorder, you cannot put those things in your body and act normally. So we just need to recognize that if we're going to have it out there, it's just like alcohol. We're trying to protect everybody from everything we can. Listen, we still sell cigarettes, and we know what cigarettes does. It kills people. There's not a redeeming quality about a Marlboro. And I'm not trying to take on the tobacco industry. They'd see me coming a mile away. But it's legal, and it's still out there. Alcohol, not everybody has a problem. They tried to get rid of alcohol during Prohibition. That wasn't the answer. The thing is it's about personal knowledge and knowing I'm not somebody who can use this stuff. If you're allergic to peanut butter, you don't accidentally buy Skippy when you go to the supermarket. You don't do it. Just like this, we just need to be more aware and understand that's not something I can do. I know some people who can sit and smoke a joint. I know a lot of people who can't. And so it's legalizing it. I think what we can do, though, is reduce some of the crime that's going on. For years, getting busted for pot was like the number one thing. We're not seeing that anymore, and I'm kind of glad about that. But we still need to be aware that just because it's legal does not mean it's safe for everybody. If you've got an issue, you cannot take it, whether it's legal or illegal.
Well, one of my arguments on the marijuana legalization is particularly when it's been through the medicinal marijuana angle of things. It's like, that's not how we do medicine. I mean, we don't just go, oh, hey, you just take as much of this medicine as you want. We figure out dosage and your weight and your condition, what you're trying to deal with, and we try and tailor, the medication as much as we can. I mean, you can make some pretty strong arguments against the medical industry from time to time, but in theory, we're trying to tailor those medications to treat whatever your particular issue is. And there's no question that marijuana has, some pretty strong anti-inflammatory properties, and so, but is that your issue that we're trying to address? And what should that dosage on that be? Or should we just say, hey, go grow your own plant and smoke all day long?
Well, it's funny, Shane, because I've had people who are anti-legalizing marijuana, saying, well, everybody, just like all the states that have legalized, they all have cards, and most of them don't even need it. It's not a medical necessity. And I say, you know what? I bet you if we looked, most of the people on prescriptions don't need the prescriptions they're on either. It's not a medical necessity. A great friend of mine had a hip replacement, and these things are now really easy these days, apparently. And the next day he was getting ready to leave the hospital, and they automatically handed him a prescription for oxys for the pain. And he asked the doctor, he goes, am I going to be in that much pain? And the doctor says, well, maybe. This is just in case. Well, why are you giving me these addictive drugs and you don't even know if there's going to be pain? So, it's everybody who wants to get the marijuana is going to get the marijuana, whether it's legal or not. I frown on them saying they're using it. If it's medical purpose, then it needs to be prescribed through an authorized doctor, and the doctor should probably dispense it instead of just having everybody open their own dispensaries. But you know what? It really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's about personal knowledge. If we can get into the communities and teach them what to look for in their sons and daughters, brothers and sisters, husbands and wives, and we teach them what to look for to recognize that there's a problem, we can get that problem treated, and then it doesn't matter if it exists. Listen, my thing was alcohol. And for years, alcohol destroyed my lives. It put me behind bars, and I went a lot of bad places. But I don't drive by thinking I've got to eliminate the liquor store, because it's not evil. Alcohol's not even evil. It just doesn't work for me. And that's what we got to understand and normalize that. Normalize, I'm allergic to this stuff. I can't take it. That's all there is.
It is. I know that there's a lot of that with alcohol and cigarettes, particularly. You're seeing it more and more, that pressure on vaping. I mean, I've known some people that have died from vaping-induced pneumonia because the oil gets in your lungs and clogs up the areola. But I don't know that we get that same argument. I mean, we do from the stodgy old people about marijuana and other drugs, but there seems like there's a lot of peer pressure for drug use, especially if you're young. You're not cool if you don't try this. How do we get around the peer pressure aspect of people that, I mean, and not only just drug dealers, just generally people that, well, yeah, I smoke this and I need to smoke this marijuana, and so I'll be more happy if you're smoking along with me. How do we deal with the peer pressure surrounding those things?
Yeah, Shane, it's something I lose sleep over at night. It's a different world than when I was growing up, and probably when you were growing up. My contact was with my friends at school, and maybe the guys I hung out with after school. And but when I was home with my family, I was home with my family. That's not the case anymore. You can be bullied at school. You can be bullied on the way to school. You can be bullied in your own bedroom because of our phones and our connections to everything. It's all there. So peer pressure has expanded into the cyber world as well. It's a tough thing to battle. The only way we can battle any of these things was, again, with knowledge and open sharing. We need to get back to our family dinner tables and talk about our days, and we need to talk about the dangers of addictions, and certainly talk about, listen, if you're going to do something, make sure you can come to me if you start to feel bad. Most people, even with substance abuse disorders, they recognize something's wrong before other people do. They start to feel bad, they start to feel worse, but they do not feel comfortable sharing it with people, and it gets worse. Same thing with most traumas. They don't feel comfortable sharing it. So as far as peer pressure, it's never going to go away. I'm sure the sport coat you're wearing was because somebody else was wearing a sport coat, so I gotta have to wear a sport coat. Or the glasses you're wearing when you walk into the optical store, they didn't put the ugly glasses on a bad looking model. They took a good looking model and put the glasses on them that you want to. Everything is peer pressure in our world.
Sure.
It's about just having the confidence to stand up for yourself and the knowledge to know when to tap out or ask for help.
Well, you segued into probably the last thing I want to talk about here, and it's just the popular argument these days that social media is a contributing factor to a great deal of anxiety and depression, and both anxiety and depression can lead to addiction and self-harm. So do you see addiction increasing with the rise of social media, or what are some of the things we can do surrounding social media and addiction-related issues?
Well, I'm not gonna take the government route and blame TikTok for all of our world's problems. It would be easy if we could, buddy. If we could shut it down, we'd be fine. Everything would be good. But no, the growth of social media has made it much more difficult. Self-esteem is now on social media. Our children, if they put a post on Facebook and nobody likes it, to them, that's like a punch in the gut. That's a defeat. You feel so being ignored online can make you feel as bad as if you were targeted online. So it's a very, very strange place. People end up getting anxiety and depressed over their online personas. I wish we could unplug for a couple of hours or even a day or two to spend time in the real world. I don't know if it's ever going to happen again. I think that we're moving into new territory. And this all happened, and then COVID hit, which COVID was the biggest boom for suicide and addictions that I've ever seen. Because what happened during COVID was people were isolated and people felt alone. Those are the two things that addictions love to feed off of, is that feeling alone and isolated and unconnected. And we have not recovered from that. The numbers went up during COVID. They have not come back down to pre-COVID numbers. We're still up, and we're still going.
They also emptied the jails of about 30 to 40% of their population of people that probably had some of those underlying issues in the first place.
Exactly. And they, nobody had a plan for how they were going to do that either. It was like one day they're in jail, the next day, hey, we're sending you home because I don't want you breathing on me. Right. That was, there was no sort of transition there. There was nothing that was done. I'd like to see things. Opioids alone, right now, let me tell you, in the last 2 decades, opioids have killed over 750,000 people, just opioids. With the way that the numbers are going, and they're going up, the next 20 years, we will see 3 million people die. And
we're just talking in the United States.
That's right.
Right.
That's right, the United States. And, worldwide, it's... the United States is number one in pretty much addiction and all of those other things too. Other countries have fentanyl, but they're not killing people at the rate that was killing us in the United States. It's insane. We are being attacked from within because and it all starts with apathy. We have to stop being apathetic. We have to get involved. And if somebody's hurting, it is our responsibility to do something. It's our responsibility as Americans, as human beings, and just as a good neighbor, to help somebody out. Stop turning away from it, because sooner or later it's going to end up in your house.
Well, I think that's a pretty good closing note there. So for people who want to know more about One Brother, One Sister and your organizations, they want to learn about it, they want to donate, where should they go as a jumping off point to find out more information about you?
Simplest way to do it is you can go online to onebrother1sister.com. Now, you could use the number 1 or you could write out the word 1, because both of them work. Onebrother1sister.com. On there, we have our phone numbers, we have our information, and you could also donate and learn more about what we're doing.
All right. Well, excellent. And I will pass that along to Kansas Bail Agents Association, maybe see about getting some more people here in our association, with the same sort of training.
We would love to be there. We are setting up trainings with states right now, and with help of Mr. Stuckman. But we are already setting up states. We'd love to come and see you and help you guys out.
Well, that's again, we have to education. I'm kind of getting off track, but we have education programs we have provided for a year, and so that would be something that I think it'd be a good idea to try to integrate into our standard education program.
That sounds great. And I want to flip the switch for a second and say I'd love to have you on one of my shows sometime. How about it?
Sure, absolutely. Whether I can expand on that as much, I don't know, but I'll be happy to come on.
All right, well, we'll figure it out. I got a couple different topics we can cover. We'll make it work, Shane.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today, and I'll do a closing on this, and we'll get you out of here.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. We would like to thank our guest, Scott Jones from One Brother, One Sister, for taking the time to speak with us today. I would encourage everyone to visit their website, onebrotheronesister.com. You can also see Scott's many podcasts at Sober Life Studios on YouTube. He clearly knows these topics. If we want to have any hope at making an impact on the crime rate, it is important that we look at the real root causes of criminal behavior and not simply the causes that politicians highlight to get votes. People with addiction issues and mental health problems have an outsized impact on public safety and the criminal justice system as a whole. Finding better ways to deal with this in the future is critical. And we hope you'll join us on the next episode of the Bail in Midwest podcast, where we'll continue to bring you conversations with people involved in the criminal justice system.
Join us again next time for the Bail in the Midwest podcast, hosted by Shane Rolf.